capture the flag.
Cool, let's go.
Flag return. Flag return.
We've lost a teammate. Target spotted.
Power items inbound.
Two going for the flag from the right side. That one's dead.
They've taken our flag. We have eyes on the enemy flag. Look there, an enemy flag carrier. We're flying now.
Flag returned. Flag captured.
Two on my X. One shot on my X.
Tango's closing in.
It's behind your raise.
Lost a teammate. Enemy there.
Power items now available.
Enemy flag returned. Enemy captured your flag.
Shield down.
Take cover.
Hurry the flag back to base. They know where you are. You're exposed, Spartan. They know where you are. There are eyes on you, Spartan.
Flag captured.
Down there.
Flag returned.
Target spotted. Enemy there.
Oh my goodness.
Power items incoming. Power items on the field.
Enemies over there. Team.
Our forces have seized the enemy flag.
Shields are down. Sniper got a headshot on him.
It's yours. Now capture it. You're exposed, Spartan. They know where you are.
5 minutes remain.
We've lost a teammate.
Flag captured.
GG.
Victory.
Bro, I have 2.5 seconds of lag. What is happening right now?
What a time to make that comment.
Who's like a pseudo-geologist, I guess, and he tells Graham Hancock that it's not possible, that the lake could have refilled that many times, and that it must have all drained at once. The evidence he gives for this is he doesn't think it was possible. Now, where is he going with all this? He's using it to support the idea that the Younger Dryas impact happened somewhere on the Laurentide ice sheet, and all of the ice suddenly vaporized, melted, and all drained through the Dry Falls Canyon in Washington State, implying that this enormous waterfall, which is carved into volcanic rock, which is ridiculously hard, happened all at once. What's the evidence he gives for this? He just doesn't think it was possible for it to happen the other way. He talks about the Comus Prairie ripples, which are the remains of a massive eddy that would happen. They're some of the largest ripples on Earth, which is a really cool geologic feature, but isn't proof of one enormous flood. We're gonna wrap this up because frankly this episode doesn't really have a lot to it. Graham Hancock goes with Alan West to the Black Mat Layer, which is located in Murray Springs in New Mexico, I think. Now, the Black Mat Layer is to me the most interesting piece of evidence that the Younger Dryas impact was actually an impact, and I don't doubt that it was an impact. In fact, I think that there is a lot of evidence that it was. The Chicxulub impact was proven because there was a Black Mat Layer, and so I don't think that it is out of the realm of possibility to say that there was a Younger Dryas impact. Frankly, an analysis of that is a topic for another video. Now, the reason I don't go all that much into this episode is because it has almost nothing to do with Graham Hancock's hypothesis. All that he's doing here is trying to talk about the Younger Dryas impact, which, again, I can say without a reasonable doubt did absolutely happen. But I think it's really interesting that he saved his most concrete, actual scientific evidence until the very end of this series. Klaus, goddammit, dude. Because this episode will make you think that there is a lot of tangible proof to the things Graham Hancock has been saying, when in reality,
Strongholds.
Claim and hold the zone, Spartan.
They're all going for A. Not A, sorry, C.
We've captured Bravo.
Your team scoring.
We've got camo.
Whirlpool.
Stronghold Bravo lost. Bet that was a surprise.
Red pipes, one shot.
Take cover.
Bravo. Active camo inbound. Active camo available. Active camo acquired.
One down.
Stronghold Charlie lost. The enemy has captured Alpha.
Enemy team score.
Down there.
Your team scoring.
It's yours. Now we keep it that way.
Enemy team scoring.
Spartan down.
Fuck.
Enemy there.
Stay mobile.
Active camo inbound.
Your team scoring.
Let's see them try to take it from us. Active camo available. Stronghold Alpha is ours. Stronghold Charlie lost.
Another one down.
Stronghold Alpha lost.
Enemy team scoring.
You're quite lethal with that.
Your team scoring.
Okay, it's 3 on C. Just take A.
Enemy team scoring.
Stronghold Alpha is ours.
Whirlpool.
Lost the lead.
Fuck!
Enemy halfway to victory.
Just keep going. Spawn. Fucking kill. Guy bottom tower. Bridge. Whirlpool.
Your team scored.
It's yours. Now we keep it that way.
Fuck, I'm doing shit.
Enemy team scored.
3 in long haul.
Stronghold Bravo is ours.
Your team scored.
Stronghold Bravo lost. Active camo inbound. The enemy has captured Alpha. Plasma grenades obtained.
Sorry.
They're close.
Stronghold Charlie is ours. The enemy has captured the Bravo.
Gain the lead.
Stronghold Charlie lost.
One shot on B.
Enemy team scored.
Enemy there.
Lost the lead.
The enemy has captured Alpha.
One shot on C.
The enemy has captured Charlie. Active camo available.
Fuck off!
Enemy team nearing victory.
mobile.
Enemy team scoring.
The enemy has captured Bravo. We've captured Alpha.
One shot on C.
Defeat.
There isn't. He has still given us no evidence of a lost civilization, no physical evidence, no genetic evidence, no evidence whatsoever. The only thing that he says in this episode is that the Younger Dryas impact probably happened. And because all of his other theories are predicated on the Younger Dryas impact happening, he just, I guess, supposes that this is enough evidence to be able to make up for the fact that he didn't give us a single piece of evidence in the rest of the episodes. So I'm honestly not going to really talk about this episode that much because that's really all there is to it. He sort of just talks about the Younger Dryas impact and says this supports everything that I said up until this point, which again is a shame because this is something that I think would be fascinating to have a full documentary on, but it is veiled in this stupid layer of bullshit mysticism. Frankly, I have been talking about Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse for the last 8.5 hours, and there's nothing that I want to do on Earth more than stop talking about it. So I think it's time that we bid this part of the series adieu. I'd like to thank you all for coming here, and stick around because tomorrow we're going to have our exam. I hope you all are studied up. We're going to go over the implications of this series. Wait, no. We're going to go over the conclusion of this series. Was Graham Hancock able to back up his claim? No. Okay, I guess we don't need to go over that. So I guess we are going to just talk about the implications of this because the implications that this series has on, I guess, science and fact as a whole is astonishing. But I think I'm going to have to probably talk about that when I am... Is that the bigger side? Yeah. I think I'm going to have to talk about that in the morning. Thank you all for joining me here today for final exam review. This class was optional, and so I'm happy to see that all of you showed initiative and came here to join me today. So a little itinerary for the rest of the lesson. So we're going to do a little quick exam review. We're going to go over all of the evidence that Graham Hancock has presented us with. We're going to assess to see whether or not he was able to provide us sufficient evidence for his hypothesis. And then we are going to move into the next part, which is going to be your final essay. I know, nobody likes final essays. But it's paramount that we take all the information that we've learned over the course of this series and apply it. So we're going to be talking about the implications of the show as a whole. Anyway, please open your textbooks to another page. It has been a long series. This has taken me like 3 days and God knows how many weeks of scripting. And so I'm very happy to finally never have to talk about this show ever again. Okay, retrospective notes. Just as a quick recap, the entire reason that we have gone through every single episode of Ancient Apocalypse is to determine whether or not Graham Hancock's hypothesis is correct. Now, let's remind ourselves, what is Graham Hancock's hypothesis? There was a lost, advanced, world-spanning civilization that existed until the end of the last ice age. That is where this series started, and poetically, that is how this series will end. So, was Graham Hancock able to provide us enough evidence throughout the course of this series to justify making 8 episodes about it? The short answer is no. The long answer is however much runtime there is left. Now, does anybody remember the criterion that we are using in order to judge whether or not Graham Hancock's theory holds any hypothesis, holds any hypothesis? In order to prove his hypothesis to us, Graham Hancock would need to show us 3 things. Material culture. Material culture that all suggests it's from a common origin, from this truly lost civilization. This could be in the form of artistic depictions, it could be in the form of languages, writing, or different cultural styles and motifs that are used throughout different parts of the world. Secondly, he would need to show us reliable dates. This means that not only is he going to have to show us material culture, but he is going to be able to prove that all of these things can be dated to around the same period. In this case, it would mean that he could prove that his material record ends about 12,800 years ago with the collapse of his theorized empire. Those dates can be obtained from anything from radiocarbon dating to stratigraphy to the relative dating with other sites around the world. And last but not least, everyone's favorite, skeletal evidence, or if you want to be nerdy about it, DNA. Okay, any questions so far? This piece of chalk has fallen off my chalk tray so many times it's just slowly being whittled down to be smaller and smaller. I'm not giving up yet though. Now it has a nice little spot for my thumb to grasp it. So let's start off with material culture because Graham Hancock spends most of this series talking about material culture. He goes from Indonesia to Ohio, and throughout all of these places he stops at multiple different cultural sites. But never once does he actually show us any material evidence of this lost civilization. Now, as some of you probably noticed, when I was listing things that could be classed as material culture, I was talking about similar artistic interpretations and motifs. And now you could reasonably argue that Graham Hancock does actually show us those things in the form of folklore and storytelling. He talks a lot about how different places have snake motifs and solstice alignments and things like that. But when I talk about material culture, I'm talking about more than multiple groups of people who all had stories about snakes, because that is not nearly enough evidence to be able to concretely assume a association with 2 different sites. So once we come to the understanding that trying to claim association based purely on folklore in civilizations in different parts of the world is unreliable at best, we've already omitted most of Graham Hancock's evidence for a cultural origin. The fact that multiple groups of people in different parts of the world had stories about serpents or civilizing heroes that came from the sea does not imply that those places were related to one another. And while folklore is an important part of archaeology, to base an entire hypothesis purely off of folklore, and one that is as dramatic as this, is beyond foolish. Now, in his defense, Graham Hancock does actually try to give us some material evidence of this lost civilization. In episode 4, I think, where he goes to the Bimini Road. Now, the Bimini Road is the only time where Graham Hancock actually speculates to finding the origins of this lost civilization, or truly a piece of material culture left over from them. So honestly, the episode on Bimini Road is the only episode that actually contains anything that pertains to this entire piece of evidence. But as you'll recall from the lesson on the Bimini Road is the only one of these episodes that doesn't actually contain any archaeology in it, because the road is not a road. It is a massive naturally occurring slab of beach rock that is incredibly common in these, saltwater marine environments. So the only time where Graham Hancock actually comes close to pointing at material evidence of this lost civilization and its origins, he's essentially just looking at a pile of rocks underwater. And when you think about that, you come to realize that every single other piece of evidence that Graham Hancock gives is not truly looking for the origins of this lost civilization, but just trying to find evidence of it in written word and similar motifs and things like that. Anyway, moving on to the next one. Reliable dates. Graham Hancock says a lot of dates throughout the course of this show. He mentions the dates that archaeologists have obtained from all of these various sites, and of course he also gives his speculative dates for, well, all of these sites. Now I understand that Graham Hancock's entire theory revolves around the idea that this civilization was wiped out about 12,800 years ago, but he manages to find a way to make almost every single site he talks about somehow fit that narrative. When he goes to the island of Malta and talks about Gigantea, he claims that there was an alignment towards the star Sirius. When he goes to Göbekli Tepe, he looks at a pillar and claims that one of the constellations is Scorpio, and that Scorpio shows its position in relation to the sun and takes that back in time to 12,800 years ago. And when he goes to North America and looks at the Serpent Mound, he unfoundedly claims that this site was built 12,800 years ago at the foot of the Laurentide ice sheet, based on nothing more than the ice sheet would have rested about 15 miles north of here. So honestly, why don't we break this down into two parts? There are dates, there are dates and there are reliable dates. Now Graham Hancock, he's really good, gives a lot of those, but this whole thing as one unit, he does not do a lot of that. Now, just so it doesn't seem like I am punching down on the way that he dates sites, I think it's important that I mention what sorts of dating methods we'd be looking at. The problem with the way that Graham Hancock dates things is they are, well, to put it frankly, not scientific. If you want to truly obtain the date for a site, you need to have concrete dates. You need to do radiocarbon dating, you need to do uranium series dating, or you need to do, I don't know, potassium argon dating. Something where you are able to truly quantify the age of a particular object or a site. Now, there are plenty of other ways to date things that don't involve running something through a mass spectrometer. However, he doesn't offer any of that either. Instead, he uses a different method to date, well, every single site. Whether it's stars or the sun or a map drawn by someone with a pencil who lived 600 years ago, Graham Hancock does it all. But not a single one of them is an actual way to date something, because all of them are founded on a subjective interpretation of the site that he's looking at. When Graham Hancock is trying to prove that Bimini Road is the remains of Atlantis, he looks at a map that was drawn almost 600 years ago. And his justification for why the Bimini Road is Atlantis is because there is an island which is drawn in the similar location that is bigger than Bimini on this old map, and therefore that island must have been this island, and it's showing it when the water level was lower, and that's why it's bigger. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy way of thinking, and I think that's the best way that I can articulate much of what Graham Hancock does here. He truly does have very little adherence to scientific diligence. The idea that while you are supposed to start with a hypothesis, you are not exactly trying to, cherry pick evidence to prove your hypothesis. You are trying to challenge yourself, essentially. And so throughout the course of the series, it becomes abundantly clear that Graham Hancock is pretty much starting with his endpoint, and everything from there is just a challenge to figure out how to fit it around his pre-existing theory. Anyway, let's get to the last one, and the one that is going to be the shortest: skeletal evidence. I don't think Graham Hancock talks about DNA once this entire series. There is no skeletal evidence. He gives no evidence as to where these Atlanteans came from, who they were, what they did, what parts of the world they settled in, if there's a genome that is consistent in different parts of the world, where their burial sites are, or really anything else that would be associated with, a world-conquering group of people. And personally, I think that there is a reason why he doesn't talk about this. And I think that that is as good a segue as any into the final section of this class. You all knew this was coming. Congratulations, all of you. You've made it to the very end of Analyzing Ancient Apocalypse, which means that you get to be presented with the final essay. Or I guess I wrote final exam and final... Okay, well, whatever it is, you're going to get to deal with it. Now, we have covered a lot in talking about Ancient Apocalypse, but all of this means nothing if we don't tie it together. And so the prompt that I want you to be thinking about for your final exam is the implications of the show as a whole. If there were one word that I could use to describe Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse as a whole, it would be the word predatory. Because Graham Hancock's show is designed specifically to take advantage of the most innocent of intent. It capitalizes on curiosity and twists interest into distrust. And throughout its runtime, it does more to sow the seeds of doubt and deceit than provide answers. Ancient Apocalypse discourages critical thinking. As I mentioned through every single one of the episodes flows about the exact same way. It begins where Graham Hancock will give an impassioned speech about all of those who are trying to silence him. He will then talk about a site where he will imply that there is some great mystery that nobody truly understands, and then he will provide you with his theory as to what happened, and weak though his theories are, he will follow it up with just more vilification of those who disagree with him. And in doing that, he ties a bow on each episode. He makes sure that by the end of it, you subconsciously think that he likes you, as if you agreeing with his ideas will not make you part of that other group that he keeps talking about. And the irony is that in doing that, Graham Hancock does the very thing that he claims to hate so much. He crushes and silences opposing viewpoints and ensures that only one narrative is heard. Even in his presentations with archaeologists on the show, we have seen that he has cherry-picked their words. Even in the beginning, he didn't come to them in good faith, not even informing them that he was going to be the interviewer. In cases like Lenny Regic and Dr. McCafferty and Mark Brink Jr., words were twisted, taken out of context, and used in a way that almost sounds like it supports Graham Hancock's outlandish theories. Because of this, Graham Hancock is doing something which is, almost worse than omitting the opposing view altogether. And that is twisting words, taking the words of his other side and using them to support his ideas, not actually allowing for a balanced balanced discussion to be had and for opposing viewpoints to be heard, but at most making it sound like archaeologists conceded reluctantly to agree with his divine truth. And because of this, the duration of Ancient Apocalypse is designed to suck you in. It starts by showing these flashy reconstructions of megalithic sites, places that speak to us, speak to our very understandable interests. And throughout its runtime, it goes from talking about archaeology to the claim that everyone in the world is lying to you, and that Graham Hancock and a few other brave alternative historians are the only ones who are willing to tell you the truth. I don't think you need me to explain to you why this is so dangerous. I'm sure that anyone who has ever read a history book could easily tell you why the silencing and crushing of opposing viewpoints is a slippery slope, and how the emboldening of only those that agree with you against a unified and common other enemy is something which leads to nothing good. And because of this, Graham Hancock's show is designed perfectly to take people who probably didn't really know much about his thoughts in the first place, people who clicked on it because they wanted a cool mystery show about archaeology, people like you and I who are fascinated with history and want to know more about it. But instead of being met with facts and the diverse world of people who lived before us, they are met with what is essentially propaganda. It contains little to no facts, with the only real archaeological information being the very brief introductions of sites which Hancock gives in the very beginning. And so as the show goes on, the people who clicked on it with the hope of being able to watch a cool thing about archaeology while they're stoned on the couch with their friends are slowly inundated with more and more rhetoric about how there's a whole group of people out there who don't want you to know the truth. Now, it would be inappropriate of me to compare Graham Hancock to any historical figures, but you can look at any point in history, at any point throughout the world, to be able to see people who have used that exact same tactic and achieved things far, far worse. So you're probably thinking, Milo, you're blowing it out of proportion a little bit. It's a show about archaeology. It's really not that serious. And in a way, I would agree with you. It's obviously not as dramatic as some of the implications which I have made. But I want to bring us back to the idea of a slippery slope, because all it takes is doubt that there is someone out there who's trying to deceive you. All it takes is thinking that there's someone who knows better than everyone else, and before you know it, you wield a lot of power. Now, for someone to not believe in the field of archaeology is fairly inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, but it is a gateway drug into something far more dangerous. We have seen firsthand what a distrust in science can do. My job revolves around analyzing the beliefs of people who claim things like flat Earth and chemtrails, things like ancient aliens and Atlanteans. And now those things may seem fairly removed from what matters in your life, and I don't blame you for that. But this distrust goes far deeper than I think we give it credit for. I live in a country where we have lost 1 million people in our most recent pandemic. And while I can't give any quantifiable number, it is humbling to think how many of these lives could have been saved if they hadn't been told to distrust science. Once you are able to convince someone that the entire world around them is out to get them, and you are the only one who can tell them the truth, you can tell them anything, and they will listen. It doesn't even matter whether or not you are going to be putting your own life or the lives of those around you in danger. All that matters is that you don't feel like an other. We live in a time where the line between fact and truth has been blurred to an almost unrecognizable degree, where many are willing to pass off their personal truths as hard facts, where those who seek power, notoriety, money, or fame are willing to say nearly anything if it gets them to the top. Louis, I'm giving the big grand finale of my speech here. Do you really want to be here for this part? Come on, Louis, we're talking about the implications of lack of trust.
Hello there, and welcome to the first episode of Dedunking. I know it's a weird name. I wasn't sure what to call it. What do you call it when you're debunking debunkers? But then I saw this clip from Milo number 2.
Last week, we exposed the lies of Graham Hancock's first 2 episodes, in a video which not only made it to the trending page, but is also now the first thing that comes up on YouTube if you search Ancient Apocalypse. Get absolutely dunked on, Graham Hancock.
And I knew I had a name. I suppose I should tell you a little bit of something about myself and why I'm even bothering making this stuff at all. I'm almost 50. I worked as an electrician most of my adult life. I follow Graham Hancock since 94 or so, Fingerprint of the Gods. When that came out, I bought it at Hastings like right away. I was anticipating that there was a little bit of a buzz, and I grabbed it early on and read it numerous times before I was even 25. And I've read a lot of his books since. I've referenced Heaven's Mirror a few times here. I've been following Graham Hancock long enough to have seen him go through a lot more of a woo phase than he's in now, and to have seen it when it was Earth crust displacement theory and a lot of that stuff. So I've been following him for a while. I'm an atheist and a skeptic. So when I come at these things, I come at it I'm not a scientist, but I come at it with a lot of scientific mindset. I do accept the basic premise that I do believe that there most likely was some sort of lost civilization. I'm hard-pressed to pin any of the advanced things that Graham Hancock would pin on it. I've watched all of his Joe Rogan stuff and his videos with Randall Carlson and all that. Well aware of the man's work, even going back to the sign and the seal when he was finding the lost Ark of the Covenant, right? Okay, so a lot of the things he says I just find ludicrous. However, I do think that there is some core of truth to some of the things he says. Watching the videos of Milo number 1 and Milo number 2 from Mini Minuteman, particularly Milo number 2's video, I was just like, this can't even be passing as debunking. This is just mockery. This is like saying, haha, look at the dumb creation. This is silly. It's not. Milo number 1, he actually, like, I respect it. I mean, I've been following him for a long time too. I'm not an academic. I don't get a spoon. I get stuck with a fork. But that's because we're more violent in the blue crawler land. Anyway, the way that my mind looks at this, and I'm probably not alone here, is that this is kind of like the early days of evolution not being accepted. We have watched. There's been a few times that Graham Hancock has made some predictions that have come to be true, like predicting that we would find things like Gobekli Tepe. or with the dating of it, or predicting that there was going to be earlier peopling of the Americas than we knew before, and we'll discuss that again in a little bit. But so there are these things that show up that he's predicted and got right, which to my understanding is generally speaking the way that you like determine whether or not somebody's hypothesis is on the right track. Now it doesn't mean that he's right, but it does when he starts making predictions and they come true. What did Darwin do on his deathbed, right? You wrote that book of predictions and all that? Okay. Anyway, after watching Milo #2's video, I decided that I needed to come at this. So I picked on Milo #1 and Milo #2 here so that I would be able to debunk something that was actually had some scientific merit to it, and then just like show why Graham Hancock feels attacked by academia from both of these guys, but particularly Milo #2. I don't even. Anyway, let's just get going.
They realized that there was 2 episodes of activity at the site, one from 500 BC, the other from 5200 BC. So again, they're willing to project the life of this site back in time 5,000 years. It doesn't seem very dogmatic of the archaeology profession to discover all these things.
But that would be a straw man, though, wouldn't it? Because he's not saying that the dogma has anything to do with 5000 BC. He's talking about 11,000 BC. When you go back to that Göbekli Tepe era, that's when the archaeologists have dug their heels in and have for decades said, no, 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 no. Only with the dating of Göbekli Tepe have they said, maybe this can happen. But even then, you start getting back into those eras, and that's when archaeologists say, I don't really think that happened. We don't have any cultures. To quote the guy that argued with Graham Hancock years ago, before Göbekli Tepe had been dated, when he was talking about the date of the Sphinx, the guy says, show me another civilization that was able to make megalithic structures 10,000 years ago, and we'll talk about it. Once again, he predicted something that happened. Anyway, that's straw man, Milo.
Firstly, Graham Hancock marvels at how large the stones are. He claims that there are about 50,000 stones at Gunung Padang, each one of them weighing about 1/3 of a ton. That's a lot, right? 1/3 of a ton? It says ton, it's gotta be big. Oh, all right. That camera's offline. You're gonna just have to deal with it. Now, 1/3 of a ton is about 600 pounds. Sounds a lot less impressive when you say it like that, isn't it? Now, don't get me wrong, 600 pounds is still stupidly heavy, but considering the heaviest deadlift ever was like 1,100 pounds, you'd probably just need a couple strong dudes to be able to move one of those.
Are you kidding, man? Okay, first of all, the 50,000 blocks, that's something that you could probably check and see if the man's published that stuff or not. It's going to come up again with you, isn't it? You just don't bother to look. I can't find anything about his published works, but there's a lot of Dr. Ali Akbar's, and I'm not an academic, so I don't have access to certain things that are behind paywalls or even know where to look in certain areas, but you would. You would know where to go, so I'm kind of disappointed in your complete lack of legwork on this, but your lack of experience really shows here. Oh, just take a couple of guys to carry a 300-pound block across a level surface, maybe 5 or 10 feet. Realistically, it would probably take 4 or 5 people, and you're going to have a lot of injuries. 600 pounds is a lot of weight, and carrying it over uneven ground, carrying it up hills, down hills, through ravines, across tree roots. You can roll them down the hill, but you ain't rolling them up the damn hill. And you're like, oh, we don't even need pulleys or anything like that. Bullshit. All right. I want to show you what we do now. This is a company that I worked alongside of when I worked as an electrician, and whenever we would do any of the big medical buildings in the area, they would have all of this groundwork done, retaining walls and stuff built like this. Pay attention to what they're using.
You've seen beautiful boulder retaining walls. You can have one of these beautiful masterpieces surrounding your home or business for less than other materials, and they look better. Natural rock boulder retaining walls are structurally sound, last a lifetime, and never go out of style. Call the experts in rock, the Rock Placing Company. Their experience and quality of work sets the standard in the Northwest. Call the Rock Placing Company, 866-926-3302.
Graham Hancock then goes on to say that there is no evidence that at this time the people of this area were anything other than simple hunter-gatherers. Well, I gotta say, if they built that, apparently not. It's ironic that he speaks like he's trying to dismantle the idea that hunter-gatherers were simple and primitive, but without that preconception, his idea completely falls apart.
I think one of the biggest differences between Graham Hancock and archaeologists is that I think Graham Hancock is sort of forced into this position where he has to believe hunter-gatherers are simple. You see it straight away in the first episode where he says, the so-called experts say that only people who lived in the Ice Age were simple hunter-gatherers. No archaeologist who studies that period would describe hunter-gatherers as simple.
Now, this is a great example of just kind of the unscientific nature of these videos, which is really sad to see coming from Milo #1, to be honest. But I'd watched his other Graham Hancock videos, so I shouldn't have been too surprised. But their like disdain for the man is palpable. There's no question at all that they do not like this guy. They fucking hate him. Hate what he stands for anyway. They despise him. And this is a perfect example of how ridiculously pedantic it makes them. If he would have called these people that made Gunung Padang, if he would have called them, I don't know, primitive instead of simple, would any archaeologist have a problem? Would either of you two have said, oh my God, I can't believe nobody that studies these would call these primitive? Of course not, because that's ridiculous. We all know they're primitive peoples, right? So I'm going to put on the screen here the online dictionary with its synonyms for primitive in regards to culture. Do you see the word simple there? Fucking, how pedantic can we be? Is a screw a simple machine, or is it complicated? Complicated to design, but it's still considered a simple machine, huh? Should we get pedantic about it? Should we all make an email campaign to the guy that's dead 150 years ago and yell at him for calling them simple machines?
In this whole episode, they keep calling Gunung Padang a hill. They never mention, as far as I'm aware, that it was an extinct volcano. I think I'm right in saying that. Volcanoes, of course, famous for their inner chambers. I think that they if I'm right in thinking that this was a volcano, I think they deliberately omit that to make the case for inner chambers sound a little bit more convincing.
Beneath the ruins of Gunung Padang, there is some sort of cavity which can be seen on ground-penetrating radar. So what is it? Is it a burial chamber? Is it full of treasure? Is it the lost city of Atlantis? I'd be willing to put my money on it is none of those things. And the reason why is a little detail which Graham Hancock conveniently leaves out of his documentary. The astute of you could probably already put it together. You know the Gunung Padang is built out of columnar basalt. You know the environment in which columnar basalt is formed. Gunung Padang is on a volcano. Now what happens inside of volcanoes? Lava tubes.
Now here I'm going to assume that they both were not aware that Graham Hancock has spoken extensively about natural caves being beneath pyramids, like in Teotihuacan, for example, and how this works into part of his hypothesis about everything. So for him to care if it's a lava tubes or a hidden chamber, for him it's both practical purposes the same thing. Group number one that settled that place would have had access to that lava tube. If there's actually 3 layers, like Dr. Daniel what's-his-hell's name says, if there's actually 3 layers like that, then that first layer would have presumably had access to those lava tubes. Pretty good chance that, Stone Age people hung out in the caves. So if the site is oriented to those, like he says, oriented to those chambers, pretty good idea to say that they were part of that complex. Meaning they could be full of gold or jewels or the lost secrets of Atlantis or maybe even an old rare DVD, who knows.
Then we get into the smash hit part of this episode. The part where he claims that in a core sample of drilling, they found evidence that there is a layer of this pyramid which dates back to 24,000 years ago, making it nearly twice as old as the next oldest megalithic structure on Earth. Do I doubt that they found a layer which is dated to 24,000 years? Not in the slightest. Do I know if it's a cultural layer or not where there's anyone actually living? I have no idea because they never talk about it.
And he claims there are layers in the site that could date back to 11,600 years ago, to the Younger Dryas. All roads lead to the Younger Dryas in the show. But maybe it's even older, maybe 20,000 years ago. I would say, I don't believe he's submitted that report for peer review, which is very important.
You can see quite a difference in their approaches here, huh? Milo number one, he's right. If you go look, this is not peer-reviewed. I was actually able to locate them and look through the entire list of this man's peer-reviewed articles, and he's never dumped this one for anybody to look at, anybody else to critique. It's still hidden. Milo number two, again, do some fucking legwork, man. If you're supposed to be here debunking shit, you can't just come off the hip and be like, oh, I looked up where fucking Namadal is. You didn't even do a good job of that. We're about to talk about that in a minute. But you've got to actually do legwork, man. I mean, I didn't go to college for archaeology. I didn't even get a degree. I just went for psychology, and only for a couple of years. And so I figured I would just make up for that by doing your fucking job for you and looking to see whether or not this was actually peer-reviewed. Wikipedia says it's not, but that's not as easy. He's got a website. You can just go scroll through and see. And it's not peer-reviewed. So this is something that's a big deal here. From the overall perspective is from what Graham Hancock and my
Husky Raid. Double kill.
Be proud, Spartan.
Your flag.
Enemy shields down.
They have our flag. They have our flag. Take it back.
Oh my fucking god.
Enemy captured your flag. Defeat.
Fuck me.
My opinion should not have fucking included any of this because it's the kind of loose thread that gives these guys something to pull on instead of looking at the main thing. But he's selling books, selling movies, selling things to Netflix, so I get that he's going to do this kind of shit sometimes, but in my opinion, as somebody who's a lot more skeptically minded than Mr. Hancock, I feel like this is the kind of stuff that just, it pisses all over what he's trying to do. When he brings out people that are, their motives are questionable. This guy, he's like Stefan Milo also mentions that this guy is, he wrote a book about Atlantis and the government. If you look into it, the government has a lot to do with that whole thing at Gunung Padang, and they are messing it up so bad that there's actually articles being written. Like one dude wrote an article about how like nationalism is just like messing with religion and stuff with it or something. I can't remember exactly, but I'll post a screenshot of it around here somewhere so you can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, anyway, the research surrounding this that comes from people that are nationals there, right now it's pretty sketchy. That's the reality of it, especially if it's not coming out with peer review. Milo number 1 nails that. Milo number 2, well, he's too busy editing his videos like this to actually like fucking science.
Graham Hancock has an alternative hypothesis. He claims that Nanmadol is actually 12,800 years old. Now that's a big claim. We're willing to push back the date of this construction by 12 times. So you need a lot of evidence to be able to back something like that up. So what is Graham Hancock's evidence that this site is actually 12 times older than the archaeological dates say it is? His evidence is that it's slightly underwater, and that his hypothesis would be supported better if it was older than that. Nanmadol was the seat of government for an entire empire. They were called the Saudler? Saudler? I don't know if I spelled that right. S-A-U-D. Nailed it. The Saudler dynasty. And I believe they were called the Saudler dynasty because the king, the monarch, was the Saudler. If I'm saying any of these words wrong, please feel free to correct me. Again, I only know about this site after doing research on it for this video. But anyway, Nanmadol was the seat of government for, this entire dynasty. The site dates to about 1180 CE, not only from archaeological data, but from the data and the stories of the people who actually live there.
Now, this was just sheerly amazing to me. Milo number 2, what in the hell, man? Okay. You guys both know that, like, his shtick is myth, he's not an archaeologist, and a lot of the data that he pulls, the majority of it is coming from megalithic structures and from mythology, right? So why are you disregarding the myths when it comes to Nanmadol? You say that the locals have an explanation for how it was built? Well, yeah, but you didn't mention it. What was it? About 2 wizard brothers levitating stones and shit? Yeah, probably a good thing not to mention that because that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't tell us how it came to be, really, does it? The other thing you don't mention is that there's supposedly 2 sunken cities off of it, according to myth. And what, Kani Maiso or in Kani Maiso Namket or some shit? I'm worse at pronouncing these things than you are. But the one that like Graham Hancock dove on when he did one of his other books, Heaven's Mirror, the 2 pillars that are like accepted by archaeologists, they're under 30 meters of water, man. Not just a shallow thing. Now, I'm an American that worked construction, so meters are foreign to me. But I got on the internet and put together some ways to like make it easier for Americans to understand. If you took 60 rabbits, put them butt to nose, and stacked them up on top of each other, big ones, that would be enough. Maybe 70 if they were a little small. Or like, say for instance, if you were to take like 90 VHS tapes and stack them on top of each other, that would be about how far underwater those things are. About 90 feet, right? 100 feet, somewhere in there. That's a long fucking way to just be like, well, And they're supposedly, according to myth, more, deeper, further out. So it's kind of disingenuous of you to be like, oh man, it's so terrible and nobody knows anything about this site except for all this other stuff, and then it's like you bring in things that are, you misrepresent it yourself. You're like, oh, well, yeah, we already know what this is a seat of power for these guys. Yeah, well, what did they say about it?
On top of that, just because maybe people were living there 20,000 years ago, does that mean the whole site dates to that time period? You have to prove those things. We can speculate all day, but you have to prove those things. Now archaeologists are really interested in site preservation. The days of just dynamiting your way into a pyramid are fortunately long gone. We have to think about preserving these sites. All excavations ultimately destroy the site, sometimes in a big way, sometimes in a small way. And we have to think carefully about when to do that. Do we have the right to so badly damage Gunung Padang to satisfy our curiosity?
I flipped those clips around chronologically, but they're only a few minutes apart, and they're both talking about the same thing. I just did it to showcase my point a little better. Yeah, you're telling the man that the goal's over there, but he can't kick the ball. This is absurd, man. Come on, Milo number 1. I expect better from you. Well, just if this is Schrodinger's cat, and you've got a bunch of physicists standing around trying to determine what's going on inside that box, you can't fucking say you're not going to open the box and then take a position on whether or not the cat's alive or dead. You got to, like, either bow out of the conversation or be willing to investigate. Those are, like, the options, right? How many times did you complain about his position being unfalsifiable in regards to whether or not this myth is about the flood or whether or not this myth came from that? How many times do you say that? But you say, okay, well, this is... And yeah, I get what you're saying. I understand we can't just go blowing up every pyramid. But you can't sit there and say, well, we don't have any evidence, but there's where the evidence would be, and you're not allowed to dig.
Modern world, with all the technology we have, the best source of evidence for connection between different peoples now and in prehistory is going to be DNA. That's what archaeologists, that's what geneticists would really expect to see if there was this globe-spanning civilization somewhere in prehistory. I think we would see a lot of genetic evidence for that, not just in ancient human remains, but still within us today. If you think about how advanced ancient genetics has gotten, you know, we're looking for really tiny percentages of archaic admixture.
Now, the most important piece of evidence that you could possibly have, the be-all, end-all to prove that your lost civilization exists, is DNA, genetic evidence.
Yes, genetic evidence would be the absolute smoking gun right here, wouldn't it? It would be all we need. Now, a couple things here. Number one, when you keep talking about him, this globe-spanning civilization, you act like he's saying that they settled everywhere around the globe and all this stuff. And let's be clear here. Really, the only evidence that he points out was like the maps and then the people going out after the apocalypse, right? So a civilization that can map the globe doesn't necessarily spread its DNA everywhere across the globe in a manner that is easily detectable. Like Stefan's Milo number 1, he talks about how this is a big deal. You know, we can detect tiny amounts of DNA and all of that. But like, what about the DNA that they just found in South America a few years ago, where it's like the Denisovan and the Neanderthal and the Australasian DNA in South Americans, and they're flabbergasted. From the University of Florida's website on it, there's an entire Pacific Ocean between Australasia and the Americas, and we still don't know how these ancestral genomic signals appeared in Central and South America without leaving traces in North America, said Andre Luis Campello de Santos, PhD, first author and archaeologist, postdoctorate fellow, blah, blah, blah. If they're saying, okay, this DNA got here and we're not even sure how it fucking got here, maybe that's Graham Hancock's smoking gun right there. This is DNA that showed up here anomalously, right? So it feels very disingenuous for you guys to be like, well, DNA is the big thing that you need and you just got none. It's like, well, you're going to have to do better than just say, you're going to have to spread DNA all around the globe and we're going to have to be able to prove that this one race of people was everywhere. It's more like, can we find anomalous DNA with a higher degree of frequency than chance would allow for? That is really where his prediction would be. So how many times do we find anomalous DNA? How many times in the historic record have we found anomalous DNA? How many times have we shifted our parameters on things because of DNA in the last 20 years, 30 years? You guys know better than me, but I'm aware that we've done it a few times. Well, that does it for the debunking of part 1.
Well, Gunung Padang.
Yes.
I realize that this is an artist's rendition of what it would look like. This is in Indonesia.
Yes,
Tell
but
me
it's
what
based,
this
it's
is.
based on the very solid science and archaeological work.
Why is there a 20,000-year-old pyramid in Indonesia?
That's a very good question. The Great Pyramids of Egypt are 4,500 years old. The Mayan pyramids are less than 2,000 years old. So, how did Graham Hancock manage to find a 20,000-year-old pyramid in Indonesia?
20,000-year-old pyramid. Man, it looks like I got my work cut out for me in this episode, don't I? All you guys that kept telling me, man, Potholer, he's the one that you got to go after. Good luck with that one. You know the saying, be careful what you wish for? Today, my friends, you are going to get it. Well, hello and welcome back to the next episode of Debunking. And for those of you who have been subscribed to me for a while, you know I'm not going to try to defend that. $20,000-year-old pyramid. But for Potholer and for anybody watching this that hasn't seen me debunk somebody before,
Husky Raid. flag returned.
How tragic for them.
Another one down.
Double kill. Killing spree. Overkill. Extermination. Kill tag. Kill trust. Play capture.
Spartan down. Enemy shields down. Another one down. Got him. Keep your head down.
Enemy Spartans are closing in.
1 minute remaining. No scope. Flag returned. 1 minute remaining.
Rockets. Enemy flags in